Breaking the Silence is a podcast that dives into the intricate and often challenging topics of grief and loss within relationships. Through insightful discussions, the podcast aims to explore how pain can be transformed into purpose, leading to healing and growth. By addressing themes such as inner child work and the journey towards feeling alive once more, this podcast offers a beacon of hope for those navigating difficult emotions. Ultimately, Breaking the Silence aims to guide listeners towards moving forward and embracing all the blessings that life has in store as they embark on a journey of self-discovery and spiritual fulfillment. I'm your guide through this journey, Renee Wallace, and I invite you to join me as we break the silence surrounding grief and loss, transforming pain into purpose and finding hope in the healing power of storytelling. Welcome, my beautiful friends. I'm so happy that you are here with me. I figured today is the best time to jump back into attachment styles and talking about the deactivating strategies of the dismissive avoidant and the activating strategies of the anxious. So go ahead and grab yourself something to drink, get cozy, and let's just chat about it. So we'll start, I guess, with the dismissive avoidance. They often use deactivating strategies as a way to create emotional distance and maintain their sense of independence. They don't realize that they're doing this by any means. All this that I'm talking about is at a subconscious level. And that's why it's so important once we gain the awareness and we start to see oh, that sounds like me. These patterns, I can see these patterns. That's when we can start to call it out. I can even catch myself now if I'm doing something and being like, okay, Renee, let's take a look at what this is really about. So anyways, I just want to remind you that it is not consciously that they're doing it. It is typically subconsciously. But these strategies help them to avoid vulnerability and keep others at arm's length. So let's go through some of the examples of it. The first one would be emotional withdrawal. And an example of this might be shutting down emotionally during an argument, or when their partner expresses deep feelings. They might even tell you this is too deep for me, or they might respond with minimal emotion, avoid making eye contact, or even leave the room. If you're doing it by phone, maybe not answer the phone, maybe not respond to a text, things like that. They also will minimize the importance of relationships. So downplaying the significance of the relationship or their partner's feelings by saying things like, I don't really need anyone, or I'll always be alone, or we don't have to see each other all the time, do we? They might act like the relationship is just one of many things in their life and not a priority to them. They might even, and we'll talk about this even more in different areas, but maybe they'll be I'm too busy, or I have a lot going on in my life, or different things like that. And those, again, are just all ways to sort of push you away and keep you at a distance. They will very much, when they are wanting to deactivate, they will focus on your imperfections. They will really start to in different ways. It can be big or small. They can start to look at maybe your flaws and think, oh, see, we could never, we're not compatible. They they chew their food this way. I don't know, whatever. But they'll start to like pick you apart verbally, mentally, even in their mind, even if they don't speak it. They're making a list, like an ick list. That's what you'll hear a lot of people call it. Like they're starting to create this ick list because the more they can do that in their mind, and these might really not be like, of course, there are things that are deal breakers for us, right? But these are things that typically, like once their nervous system is calm again, would not really be a big deal. Um, you know, and so they do this ick list, and they create this whole list, and it helps them to detach and deactivate, and just put that distance there. Um, they might say things like, you're too needy, you're too much, or even things like, we don't like any of the same foods. It could never work between us because this or that. Just creating anything in your mind to make the distance there. This relationship would never last anyways. You're too good for me. On and on. So and even in different ways too with that, of like, they might say things, this is very, very common, things like, I can't give you what you need. I'm not your knight in shining armor. You deserve more than me. You deserve better. So these are all just ways to create distance. And then they also will tend to keep conversations at surface level. They do not want it to get very deep because, again, the deeper you go with conversations and things, the more vulnerable the more vulnerable it is to them, the more uncomfortable that can be. So they try to keep it very surface level, just talking about normal things. And they might use a lot of humor, anything just to deflect. Like they do tend to use a lot of humor and just want to keep things very light and not talk about really deep or meaningful things. Another thing is they very much prioritize their independence. So examples of this, they stress the importance of their alone time, sometimes really to the point of excluding their partner from significant parts of their lives. They might not involve you with like meeting their family or, different things. They might insist on separate hobbies, friends, like, or even like separate living arrangements. So anyways, they definitely tend to be very slow to open up to involving you in that part of their life. They can also pull away after intimacy, and I want you to think of this in different ways. So they can become cold and distant after a moment of closeness, and that could be maybe maybe they did open up and were very vulnerable and talked about something very private with you, because they tend to be very private people. So maybe after a moment of that, like, then all of a sudden they're like, oh my goodness, I feel so vulnerable now. And it might not be in that moment. Maybe it's the next days or whatever. You'll start to notice then that they're starting to deactivate because they're starting to pull back some. They're wanting to put those walls back up around their heart. Like, that's a little too scary for me. It can also be maybe you spent a weekend together, or you just had a really amazing date, or maybe it can go as far as like once you get engaged or you move in together or after sex. Or like I said, a really emotional conversation. They might suddenly become like less responsive and want to create physical and emotional distance. It could be by leaving the room or just being very short in their responses with their texts, and like maybe you noticed before, like texts were very consistent and you communicated fairly often, or you just sort of know the routine of what feels normal to your guys' relationship. Um, and you feel the difference. You notice like, the answers are very short in their texts, or they're becoming further apart and more sporadic. They will, and this goes right into like ghosting or avoiding communication. So they can very much just up and like disappear, start ignoring your texts, your calls, your messages. And that can go on for extended periods of time, especially. And the reason for this, I should say, with all of these, again, it comes back to the vulnerability and the independence. They have a fear of engulfment, but also they begin to feel overwhelmed with that. So, yes, in that fear of engulfment and like losing their independence and being too vulnerable, they begin to feel overwhelmed. And their capacity level is totally different than somebody else's capacity level. And so, when they reach that capacity, which can be much lower than maybe yours, they feel like I need to tap out, right? Like they're just overwhelmed. And when you're overwhelmed, they tend to, instead of maybe saying, hey, I'm overwhelmed or I'm feeling stressed out, I need some time to myself, they tend to start ignoring the texts, the calls, messages. And this can go on for days, weeks, even months, until they feel like they've regulated the nervous system again and they feel like they have a sense of control and they have their space again. Like, because they're saying because they're too busy, this is why. But really, it isn't. It is them avoiding being close, being vulnerable, them feeling overwhelmed. And they also will tend to very much be non-committal. Examples of this is you could be with them in a long-term relationship, or, okay, well, let me back that up. They are very good at not wanting to put labels on anything. Like, they would be happy to keep it as friends, and I'm putting quotes around friends because there's nothing friends about it. It is very much more than friends, but they are very comfortable with saying it's friends. So it can very easily turn into a situationship where you're like, what in the world are we? And they are totally good with allowing that to go on for years if you'll allow it. And they might, say things like, let's just see how things go, or I'm not ready for anything serious, or why do we have to put a label on it? And so then again, and I say none of this, of course, all of this, I'm just sharing what they tend to do to deactivate. And again, stressing that it isn't intentional. Like they don't like sit down and be like, oh, today I'm gonna like totally blow them off and just ignore them. It is like this feeling, like it's this visceral feeling that just comes up inside them that it's so important. That's why we have to learn our nervous system, and we have to start to recognize like what is coming up for us, and that it isn't the other person. It is us. It is our wounds from our childhood that are triggering inside us. And our brain is just saying, you need to do whatever it takes right now to feel safe. You need to push them away. You need to not respond to this text. Like you just totally feel this, like, for lack of better words, truly like an ick in that moment of like, ooh, no, like I don't want to talk to you right now. I don't want to text you. Whatever. So, and then with that, then there's the physical distance part of it. So they'll start creating physical space by sitting far apart, avoiding touch, or even choosing, if it's in a marriage or whatever, choosing to sleep separately. They might find excuses to avoid like physical closeness, like they're just too tired or not in the mood or whatever. And so again, they use all the behaviors. Those are like the top 10. And I'm sure as soon as I end this recording of this podcast, I'll be like, oh, I totally forgot to talk about that. But you know what? There's always another one. Um, Again, it helps them to protect themselves from feeling too vulnerable and dependent on others. And while, yes, they absolutely use the behaviors to create the distance that they crave, but ultimately, they're hurting themselves too because it makes it difficult for them to form close, meaningful relationships. And they really do want to be loved. They really do want relationship. We were created for it. I think that for them to begin to heal some of those wounds, I know we've talked about this before, even just opening up the smallest amount to one person. Maybe it's not getting on a podcast and sharing deep parts of yourself and being vulnerable. Maybe it's just one person that you trust and beginning to take small steps to open up to them. Maybe something you wouldn't normally ever do, saying, okay, today I'm going to do that. And yeah, it is going to feel uncomfortable. I was actually just talking with one of my kids last night about this and what feels very uncomfortable for him. And I was explaining to him about the whole capacity thing. And if we just do that really uncomfortable thing, even a tiny, tiny bit, it will begin to not feel uncomfortable. It will begin to feel normal. And then we just keep doing a little bit more. And that is how we begin to raise our capacity level for what we're comfortable with. So for example, if you do not like to really physical touch, just no, I do not. I have an issue with physically touching people. Maybe it is for 15 seconds, holding their hand or hugging them just a little bit longer. Maybe you would normally do like a super quick hug. Maybe it's hugging them just a little bit longer than what you normally would. And you're building that capacity. So, maybe it's, if you normally would just text, maybe it's getting on the phone and actually having a conversation. Or whatever that might be, making the effort to see them, to spend time with them, just a little bit more than what you're normally comfortable with. Okay, so hopefully that helps with, and that really is going to go, well, no. So now we'll go in more into what goodness, let me get my words together. The anxious will do. They want to come close, right? So the avoidant, when they're feeling their nervous system is out of whack and they're overwhelmed, they're going to push away, right? The anxious is trying to bring you close. They're trying to reestablish connection. They want confirmation that everything is okay. So theirs might look first one might be frequent texting or calling. So examples of this would be sending multiple texts or making repeated calls. And when they don't receive an immediate response from their partner, they might start texting things like, "Are you okay? I miss you. Where are you?" Things like that, just often escalating them if there's no reply. And I know some people are extremely anxious and, they can start blowing up your phone legitimately like, hey, I know your phone's like totally charged. I was just with you. Why aren't you responding to me? Like things like that. They are often seeking reassurance. Examples of this would be like asking questions. Do you still love me? Are we okay? Even if there hasn't even been like an apparent problem, just constantly like needing that reassurance that you still care about them, that you think about them. Um, they need constant, and again, this is a spectrum. Anxious can be different, in the severity of it. Like I said, some will totally blow up your phone and others not as bad. But they need the constant verbal communication of their partner's feelings. They very much tend to be hyper vigilant. They pay close attention to small changes in their partner's behavior, such as tone of voice or the amount of time that they spend together. They notice the patterns of what was the normal and when things change. Like what is, wait a minute, this is totally like not typical behavior. And so they notice if something seems off, and they might immediately assume the worst and act out to get reassurance. They might assume like, oh my gosh, he's not responding to my text. He's with someone else, or she's with someone else, or they don't like me anymore. I mean, this could be in friendship too. Like, I don't want you to think just like, romantic relationships. I want you to think like family and friends. Like, if your family member doesn't respond, like, oh my gosh, they must be mad at me about something. What did I do wrong? Like, I know they're angry. Or, your friend, like, what did I do to upset them? So it can very much play out in all our relationships. Another thing they'll do to reestablish connection is create conflict. Picking a fight or bringing up past issues as a way to engage their partner emotionally, even if it's a negative attention is better than no attention, right? So the goal is often to provoke a reaction that gets their partner to show that they still care. It could be something like trying to make them jealous about someone else or something, just anything that reaction again of like, oh, well, they obviously still care about me. And they can become very clingy or over attentive. So examples of this is trying to spend all their time with their partner, their friend, family member, whatever. Often at the expense of their own independence. Like they tend to not like to be alone. They want to always be with people. So they might insist on like being involved in every aspect of their partner's life and feeling left, so that they avoid feeling left out or forgotten. They can very much, another one that they can do is monitor social media. They will be watching it like a hawk, just checking to see like if people are liking or commenting or reading every post. Like they're just monitoring and watching what you might be doing, commenting on other people's posts. They very much are checking to make sure, if you're out doing things, if you're out with people, watching social media very closely. And then self-sabotage, they also will do that, which I honestly will say avoidance self-sabotage too, just in different ways. So the anxious might engage in self-defeating behaviors like testing their partner's commitment by threatening to leave the relationship or expressing doubts about the relationship. And this is like a way for their partner to, prove their love and commitment like over and over again, like trying to get them to jump through hoops of like proving that you love me, that you're really not going to abandon me. And I think the avoidant self-sabotages absolutely, but more in a different way, more of like, well, they push you away, of course. And I think that is how they self-sabotage the relationship. Um, And maybe to some degree, maybe proving that you really won't leave them because they do have an abandonment wound too. But they also have that core wound of engulfment, of the defectiveness wound. So some of theirs really is more, I feel like, I there's ultimately something wrong with me. I'm just inherently bad, defective. I'm never going to be what you need. I'm never going to be good enough for you. Good enough for you. And so that is where I think when they're thinking, I will never be what you need, I don't know how to do relationships. That's where they self-sabotage because then they push away. And whereas the anxious is more like, threatening to leave the relationship, trying to not push away, but just wanting you to jump through the hoops of prove that you really do love them and you really are committed to the relationship. And then physical closeness is another one for them. They will seek physical closeness through touch or cuddling, especially during moments of insecurity. And so I want you to hear this, like, of course there is the healthy balance of physical touch. Like, there is something beautiful about that. It is so regulating to our nervous system. So there's the part of co-regulating, and that is what both need to learn. Well, see, I guess I should say the anxious very much loves to co-regulate, but so they do know that. So I shouldn't say they know how to, they need to learn how to do that. They do know how to do that. They actually need to learn how to regulate on their own. The avoidant is so used to doing everything on their own. They're hyper independent and feel like they don't ask anybody for help. They do it themselves. They can't count on anybody. All they can count on is themselves. They need to learn to co-regulate, to allow somebody else to be there for them. And so in this, and of course, in many aspects, maybe it's just helping them out with something, where normally they would never ask for help. Like, hey, yeah, could you do that for me? That would be great. But in this sense, I'm talking about right now with physical closeness. It is a beautiful thing when we can co-regulate with somebody, where we can, hug them and just hold them close. And especially if your nervous system is calm, when you are holding them, that is helping to calm their nervous system too. You are co-regulating. So, with the anxious, they are going to try to, when they're feeling insecure, they're going to want to use physical closeness as a way to to help regulate their nervous system. They're going to use it to like that. And unfortunately, they can use this in an intimate way. Like if we are physically intimate, then everything's okay, or my nervous system's calm now, or so they can use physical closeness as a way to feel connected and reassured. So the activating strategies for the avoidance, for the anxious, are often, again, unconscious attempts to cope with the anxiety of possible abandonment. And their goal is always like to try to reestablish a sense of safety and connection. And even though it puts a strain on the relationship, because sometimes it very much feels like to their partner, like, this is too much. So again, I think I've pretty much touched on it, like, and throughout this whole series, the anxious needs to work on learning to regulate their own nervous system and being able to be independent. The avoidant needs to work on co-regulating. They still, yes, they need to regulate their nervous system too, but they need to learn to do it with someone else. They need to allow somebody to come close and regulate together. So there's that balance. And something, I don't know if I've touched on this before or not, but I do want to, just because it popped in my mind just now, and I think it's very important. So the anxious obviously experiences a lot of anxiety. That's why they're anxious. The avoidant very much experiences anxiety too. And that is surprising to people because the avoidant seems so like strong and stoic and put together and calm on the outside, but they are not. There is anxiety inside them. And that is when that anxiety gets too high, that's that visceral, like the nervous system is just going crazy, like, oh my gosh, freaking out basically. It's such a visceral feeling inside them that all that they can think to do is, I've got to get away from this somehow. So I want you to realize that they do experience anxiety, very much so on the inside. And that is where that whole feeling of overwhelm comes, and that's where they deactivate. And so I would encourage you both, whether you're anxious, fearful, avoidant, or avoidant, to start to look at what you're doing, your strategies. Like, are you trying to push somebody away? Are you creating the ick list? Are you making up this story in your head? Is your brain starting to tell you all these things to keep you safe of why this relationship would never work? All these things about them. I challenge you to stop and look at that and say, hey, like, this person, when I'm calm, I mean, I know you're not recognizing there in that moment, but start to challenge yourself to look at that. Like, there was a reason why you really like this person. And really work to like notice that. And if you're activating, notice, hey, I need to learn to be it for myself and not depend on somebody else to always make it okay for me. Like, I need to be able to sit with myself, calm myself, and know that I've got this. I hope that sharing all this helps. I hope that like talking about the deactivating and the activating strategies brings even more awareness for you, and that you can start to look at that and notice and be aware that it is not your partner. It is not your friend. It is not your family member. It is your inner child, your wounds that are being activated, and your brain is just trying to create safety. And your brain does not realize that, I mean, it's just trying to keep you safe. So it's going to do whatever it takes. And you have to reparent yourself, just go to do those uncomfortable things of, sitting again with the feelings or processing it or allowing someone to come close to you and, just really starting to slowly take one of those things, whatever you notice that you're doing, and, like sort of break it down a little bit. Like if you're creating that ick list, like, really? Like, who are they really? Like, who cares if they don't like the same foods as me? They are amazing to me. They make me feel really good. I love talking to them. I'm happy when I'm around them. They bring peace to my life. They bring joy. Start to look at those things. Start to name the other things. That's what I would challenge you to do. Like when your brain wants to create the ick, start to name the things. And it might be challenging because your brain's working really hard, but start to create the things that drew you to them to begin with. So I hope this is helpful. I send you off with so much love, and I'm having so much fun with this whole series and what you all think about it and your experiences. And yeah, it's a lot of fun sharing this with you. And again, I send you off with so much love, and I will talk with you soon. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Breaking the Silence. As we conclude our time together, let us carry forward the stories we've heard, the emotions we've shared, and the connections we've forged. Remember, the journey through grief and loss is not one we walk alone. In the silence, we find solidarity. In our shared experiences, we find strength. And in our vulnerability, we find resilience. If you or someone you know is navigating the complexities of grief, know that there is support available. Reach out, lean on your community, and remember that healing is not linear. It's a journey, and you are not alone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being a part of this community. Until next time, may you find peace in the spaces between the silence. Please be sure to subscribe below and leave us a review. If you'd like to connect further, you can find me on Instagram at Coaching with Renee.